I never thought I'd see the day when the legacy I built over 5 decades would be reduced to a plastic carousel horse. $6 million. That's what my horse breeding operation was worth when I handed it to my nephew Derek last spring. The same nephew who learned to ride on my shoulders, who I taught to muck stalls when he could barely lift a shovel, who I paid through veterinary school because he swore he wanted to take over the family business. "Uncle Hank," he'd say, "I want what you have." Well, he got it all right. 3 months after I signed over Clearwater Stables to him, Derek sold every horse, every acre of the Kentucky bluegrass that had been in our family for generations and disappeared. Left nothing but a cardboard box with divorce papers for me to sign and this cheap carnival prize on my doorstep. The note just said, "Something to remember your horses by." 47 championship horses, gone. My retirement plans, gone. The only thing I had left were questions. How could I have been so blind? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, where horse culture isn't just a hobby, it's a religion. My father, Richard Sullivan, was a tobacco farmer who thought horses were for rich folks with more money than sense. He'd spit tobacco juice whenever the subject came up. "Horses eat money," he'd say. But my mother came from old thoroughbred stock, both her family and their horses. She'd sneak me out to her cousin's farm where I'd help with the yearlings. When I was 12, Dad caught me reading a book on equine genetics instead of working the tobacco fields. He tore it up right in front of my 4-H club friends. No son of mine is going to waste his life chasing after some blue bloods hobby. I can still feel the heat of embarrassment burning my ears as the other kids watched. After high school, I enlisted in the Army rather than face another day on Dad's farm. When I came home 4 years later, he died of a heart attack, leaving nothing but debt and a worn-out tobacco farm that was worth less than what was owed on it. Mother had passed while I was in basic training. It felt like a sign, a clean slate. I got a job working at Calumet Farm, starting at the bottom, sleeping in the tack room. By 30, I'd saved enough to lease a small property and buy 2 decent broodmares. I called it Clearwater Stables after the creek that ran through the property. My specialty became rehabilitating problem horses, the ones other breeders had given up on. Within 15 years, I had a reputation for turning around difficult bloodlines. My sister Beth's boy, Derek, started hanging around when he was 8. His father had left when he was just a baby, and Beth worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. I became the father figure he never had. That kid had a way with horses that I'd never seen, almost like he could speak their language. By the time he was in high school, I was paying him to work weekends. And when he got accepted to the veterinary program at the University of Kentucky, I covered every penny. "This place will be yours someday," I told him at his graduation party. "I never had children of my own, and you're the closest thing I've got to a son." What I didn't tell him was that I'd already battled colon cancer twice. My doctor had been frank. The 3rd time would likely be the charm, and we both knew it was coming back. I wanted to make sure Clearwater would live on after I was gone. Last year, when I felt the familiar symptoms returning, I made what I thought was the grandest gesture a man could make for family. I signed over the entire operation to Derek. $6 million in land, stock, and equipment. All I asked was that I could stay in the farmhouse until I passed, and that he'd maintain the Sullivan legacy. He hugged me with tears in his eyes, swore he'd make me proud. What I didn't know was that Derek had gambling debts that would make a Vegas high roller sweat. Or that he'd been falsifying breeding records to cover his tracks when he'd use operation funds to place bets. Or that his new wife, Melody, who I'd only met twice, had expensive tastes that my nephew was desperate to satisfy. The secret I kept from everyone? I wasn't actually dying. The symptoms were from medication side effects, not cancer. My doctor confirmed it a week after I'd already signed everything over. I decided not to tell Derek right away. I figured we'd laugh about it later once he settled into running things. Why complicate the transition? That decision would come back to haunt me in ways I couldn't possibly imagine. It was the annual Kentucky Thoroughbred Breeders Association Spring Gala, the biggest social event on the local calendar. I'd been attending for 40 years, but this would be my first time going as a guest rather than an owner. Derek insisted I come, said he wanted to show me off to everyone. I should have recognized the false note in his voice. I still had my old tuxedo, though it hung looser on my frame than it once had. As I adjusted my bow tie in the mirror, I noticed Derek hadn't been around the farm much lately. The staff seemed on edge, and our prized stallion, King's Ransom, worth over $1 million on his own, had been visiting another farm for 2 weeks. Strange, since breeding season was winding down. When Derek picked me up, he was driving a brand new Range Rover. "Business is good," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His wife Melody sat in the back, tapping away at her phone, barely acknowledging me. Her diamond earrings caught the light. They looked new, too. The Louisville Marriott Ballroom was packed with Kentucky's horse royalty. Old rivals clapped me on the back, asked how retirement was treating me. Couldn't be better, I'd say. Derek's taking Clearwater to new heights. Meanwhile, I noticed people whispering when we passed, conversations stopping abruptly. Bill Thornton, my oldest friend in the business, cornered me at the bar. "Hank, we need to talk," he muttered, but Derek appeared out of nowhere, steering me away. "Uncle Hank is tired, Bill. Maybe another time." I wasn't tired, not even close. During dinner, Derek clinked his glass and stood. He hadn't mentioned giving a speech. "I'd like to thank everyone for their support during this transition period," he began. "As many of you know, my uncle built Clearwater from nothing, but times change and the industry changes. That's why I'm excited to announce that Clearwater Stables is entering a new chapter." My stomach dropped. What new chapter? Next week, we'll be completing the sale of our entire breeding operation to Blue River Holdings. I'm looking forward to consulting with their international team while pursuing new opportunities. The room went silent. I felt every eye turn to me. This was the first I'd heard of any sale. Blue River Holdings wasn't even a horse operation. They were land developers known for building luxury subdivisions. "A toast," Derek continued, raising his glass higher, "to my Uncle Hank, whose legacy made this all possible." The applause was scattered, uncomfortable. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. 50 years of work, sold without a word to me. The farmhands who'd worked for me for decades, what would happen to them? The horses? The land? As coffee was served, I finally found my voice. "When were you planning to tell me?" I asked quietly. Derek leaned in, his voice suddenly cold. "It's not your concern anymore, Uncle Hank. You signed everything over, remember? You should be thanking me. I got top dollar, despite those falsified stud records we found." "What falsified records?" My hands began to shake. "Come on, Uncle Hank. The genetic testing didn't match up on at least 6 of the foals from last season. Someone was cutting corners. Don't worry, I didn't tell the buyers. Professional courtesy," he smirked. "That's impossible," I whispered. I had never, not once in 50 years, falsified a breeding record. "Is it? Maybe you're not as sharp as you used to be. Good thing you're retiring." Derek turned away to chat with a Blue River executive. It hit me then. Derek had falsified the records himself, creating a paper trail that would implicate me if anyone dug deeper. He'd set me up to take the fall if questions arose after the sale. Bill Thornton appeared at my elbow again. "Hank, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Something's not right."
Melody's brother is shorting threadbare stocks, and suddenly all your horses are on the market. Derek's been shopping your entire operation since February. February, 2 months before I'd even signed anything over. The room started spinning. My legacy wasn't just being sold, it was being dismantled by the person I trusted most. And worse, he was poisoning my reputation in the process. As the evening wound down, Derek announced one more thing. Since Uncle Hank is feeling nostalgic tonight, I have a special gift to present at the farmhouse. Everyone's invited for a nightcap. I had no idea what he was planning, but the gleam in his eye made my blood run cold. The cavalcade of luxury cars following us back to Clearwater felt like a funeral procession. I sat silently in Derek's Range Rover, my mind racing, trying to figure out what game he was playing. What I didn't know then was that Derek had emptied the farm's accounts that morning. What I couldn't have guessed was that he'd already booked one-way tickets to the Cayman Islands.
The gift he mentioned was just a diversion, his final cruel flourish before disappearing with everything I'd built. The caravan of cars crunched up the gravel driveway of Clearwater Stables, my home for nearly half a century. Floodlights illuminated the main barn, which seemed oddly empty. No nickering of horses, no stable hands, just silence. Derek led the procession inside, where a makeshift bar had been set up. Champagne flowed as the Kentucky elite milled about, examining the vacant stalls with the detached curiosity of museum-goers. "Where are the horses?" I finally asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Derek smiled thinly. "Being transported to their new homes. Efficient, right?" A woman I recognized as the editor of the Blood Horse magazine approached. "Mr. Sullivan, how does it feel to be retiring after such an illustrious career?" Before I could answer, Derek cut in. "Uncle Hank's been ready to step away for some time. Health concerns, you know." He tapped his temple meaningfully. "Some days are better than others." The implication hung in the air. I was losing my faculties. I saw pity in her eyes as she nodded and moved away. "And now," Derek announced, clinking a knife against his champagne flute, "the moment we've all been waiting for. Uncle Hank's retirement gift." Melody wheeled in something covered by a velvet cloth. With a theatrical flourish, Derek pulled it away to reveal a carousel horse. Garish, plastic, and spray-painted gold. Someone had roughly attached a nameplate that read, "Clearwater's Last Champion." "Since you can't take care of real horses anymore," Derek said loudly, "we thought this would be more your speed. No feeding, no vet bills." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. I stood frozen, humiliation burning through me like wildfire. "Actually," I said, finding my voice, "there's something everyone should know." Derek's smile faltered. "Uncle Hank, you're tired. Let me call you a ride home." "I'm not going anywhere." I straightened my shoulders. "And I'm not dying." The murmurs stopped. Every eye in the barn fixed on me. "That's right. The tests came back clear weeks after I signed over the property. There is no cancer recurrence. Which means," I turned to the Blue River Holdings executive, "this sale might have some legal complications." Derek's face drained of color. "You're confused." "I'm not confused about the fact that you've been planning this since February, 2 months before I signed anything over to you. I'm not confused about the falsified breeding records you created to damage my reputation. And I'm certainly not confused about Kentucky's laws regarding fraudulent property transfers." I pulled a folded document from my jacket pocket, the letter from my doctor confirming my clean bill of health dated 1 week after the property transfer. You see, if I'd known I wasn't dying, I never would have signed anything over. That creates what the lawyers call an absence of informed consent.
I'd spent the car ride back making a few discreet calls to my old attorney. The Blue River executive was already on his phone, walking rapidly toward the exit. "You ungrateful old fool," Derek hissed, stepping close enough that only I could hear. "You have no idea what you've done." "Actually, I do. I've exposed a thief. My only regret is that he's family." I turned to address the stunned crowd. "I apologize for the theatrics tonight. It seems my nephew has been playing a long con, not just on me, but potentially on all of you. I suggest checking any breeding records or transactions you've had with Clearwater in the last year." Chaos erupted. People rushed to their phones, the Blue River team huddled in urgent conversation, and someone mentioned calling the Kentucky Racing Commission. Melody shrieked at Derek. "You said this was legitimate. My brother invested everything based on your guarantees." I walked out of the barn into the cool Kentucky night, past the empty paddocks where generations of champions had grazed. Behind me, I could hear Derek's desperate attempts to salvage the situation, his voice rising to a shout as accusations flew from all directions. I made it to the farmhouse porch before my legs gave out. I sat heavily on the steps, staring at the moon rising over land that had been my life's work. Everything was gone: the horses, my reputation, my retirement security. And for what? So Derek could escape gambling debts and live some fantasy life with his gold-digging wife? What I didn't know then was that Derek had more than gambling debts. He had crossed people you don't cross in Kentucky. People who don't handle unpaid debts with lawyers, but with threats.
People who were already looking for him and who wouldn't be deterred by his hasty escape plan. The next 48 hours were a blur of lawyers, police reports, and reporters camped at the end of my driveway. The story broke in the Herald-Leader the following morning. Horse farm heir allegedly defrauds uncle, flees country. By noon, it was national news. Derek and Melody never made it to the Caymans. Their flight had a layover in Miami, where federal agents were waiting. Turns out wire fraud across state lines gets the FBI's attention fast, especially when it involves Kentucky's sacred horse industry. The parade of visitors started with Bill Thornton, who brought coffee and donuts from Spalding's. "You've got friends, Hank," he said simply. "Just tell us what you need." What I needed was to figure out where my horses had gone. The answer came from an unexpected source, Melody's brother, Jason. He arrived looking shell-shocked, his designer suit rumpled from a night in a holding cell. "I didn't know," were his first words. "I swear to God, I thought it was legitimate." Jason had been the financial engineer of Derek's scheme. He'd created shell companies to purchase the horses at fractions of their value, planning to resell them once the dust settled. The good news? We could trace every animal. The bad news? They were scattered across 6 states. "I'll make it right," Jason promised, desperation in his eyes. "I'm cooperating with the feds. I can help you recover everything." I didn't trust him an inch, but I needed what he knew. By week's end, a legal team from the Kentucky Thoroughbred Association had assembled to help me. The property transfer was deemed fraudulent. Derek had misrepresented material facts and coerced a transfer under false pretenses. Blue River Holdings backed out, claiming they'd been deceived as well. Recovery was another matter. The farm accounts were drained, the horses were gone, and I was officially homeless until the legal mess untangled. Marianne Cooper, who owned the neighboring Willow Creek farm, appeared at the motel where I was staying. "This is ridiculous," she said, looking around my sad little room. "I've got an empty guest house, and you're going to use it until this is settled." Marianne and I had been competitors for decades, occasionally bidding against each other at auctions, but never more than nodding acquaintances. Now she was offering sanctuary. "Why?" I asked.
Because what happened to you is a disgrace, she said firmly. And because 30 years ago, your advice saved my farm when black mold threatened my entire herd. You probably don't even remember. But I did remember. In this business, we competed fiercely but helped each other through crises. It was the Kentucky way. Mary Ann's guest house became Command Central for Operation Recovery, as my impromptu team called it. Jason, working for redemption and a reduced sentence, tracked down each horse. Bill rallied the Kentucky thoroughbred owners to create an emergency fund. My former stable manager, Carlos, located most of our old staff, who'd been abruptly terminated when Derek sold everything. 3 months in, we'd recovered 38 of my 47 horses. King's Ransom, my prized stallion, was found at a small breeding operation in Oklahoma, sold for 1/10 of his value. When I saw him being unloaded from the trailer, his ears perked up in recognition, and I'll admit, I wept like a child. The legal battle was far from over, but the Kentucky Racing Commission fast-tracked the restoration of my breeding licenses. With the horses returning, I needed land. Mary Ann shocked everyone by proposing a merger. Clearwater and Willow Creek would combine operations, with me running the breeding program and her handling the business side. I'm 74 and have no heirs who care about horses, she explained. You're 71 with all the knowledge but no capital. Makes sense to me. It was more than sense, it was salvation. Derek pled guilty to multiple felony counts. The plea deal required full restitution, but everyone knew that money was gone. He was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. Melody filed for divorce before sentencing. I visited him once at the detention center. He couldn't meet my eyes. Why? I asked. The only question that mattered. It started small, he said finally. A little skimming to cover debts. Then more debts to cover the skimming. Then Melody wanted a bigger house, fancier vacations. I kept thinking I could fix it with one big score. He shook his head. I never meant for it to go this far. But intentions don't rebuild what betrayal destroys. The unexpected twist came 6 months later. A registered letter arrived from a law firm in Lexington. Inside was a deed to 40 acres adjoining Willow Creek, prime pasture land that had once belonged to my family, sold decades ago when my father's tobacco farm failed. An anonymous donor had purchased it and transferred ownership to me. It took weeks to uncover the truth. The donor was Derek's father, the man who'd abandoned him and my sister 30 years ago. He'd made a fortune in real estate in California and had been following his son's career from afar. When the scandal broke, he came back to make amends the only way he knew how. He wanted to right a wrong, his lawyer explained. He said the Sullivan name deserved better. 1 year after that terrible night at the gala, Clearwater Willow Partnership held an open house. Our combined operation was smaller than my original farm, but stronger in many ways. The Carousel horse that Derek had left as a final insult, I kept it, placed it right at the entrance to the main office as a reminder that sometimes what's meant to break you becomes the symbol of your resilience. King's Ransom sired 12 foals that season. I named the first one Phoenix Rising. Looking back now, 2 years later, I realize that what Derek took from me, he actually gave me something greater in return. Not just a second chance, but a better one. The Clearwater Willow Partnership has won 3 major stakes races this year, and our breeding program has a 2-year waiting list. I still keep that Carousel horse by the door. Visitors often ask about it, expecting some sentimental story. Instead, they get a lesson about trust, betrayal, and the power of community to heal what family can break. The horse industry in Kentucky isn't just about bloodlines and breeding. It's about the people who stand by you when everything is gone. If there's one thing I've learned at 71, it's that legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you rebuild when everything falls apart. Thank you for listening to my story.
If you enjoyed it, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who might need to hear that second acts are possible at any age. And remember, sometimes life's greatest victories come after its most humiliating defeats.